This is episode number 36 with your host, Dakota Dawn Johnson. We'll be reflecting on life lessons learned that started on the back of a horse, and stay tuned to find out who the very first cowboy co-host is assisting with today's episode. Hey y'all, and welcome. You're listening to the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I'm your host, Dakota Dawn Johnson, small-town cowgirl with southern roots, blazing a trail as a Midwest ranch wife, mama, and businesswoman. The mission of Cowgirl Confessions is to share the wonderfully wild and western life stories of cowgirls from all walks of life. We'll talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to navigating careers, cowboys, kids, and cattle. Legendary cowgirl Dale Evans said it best: "Cowgirl is a pioneer spirit, a special brand of American courage. The cowgirl faces life head-on, lives by her own lights, and makes no excuses. Cowgirls take stands. They speak up. They defend the things they hold dear. A cowgirl might be a rancher, a barrel racer, a bull rider, or an actress, but she's just as likely to be a checker at the local Winn-Dixie, a full-time mother, a banker, an attorney, or an astronaut. If you're into wet saddle blankets, talks with God, buckets full of laughter, and the life lessons learned in the process, kick off your boots and settle in. I pray these stories encourage, empower, and give you just the leg up you need. Here's to embracing the cowgirl state of mind, no matter how wild and western life may get along the way." Hi, friend. I hope wherever you're listening to this that you're doing well and staying as cool as possible in all of this summer heat. Y'all, I can't believe it's already the end of July, and the long, hot summer days have been some of the hottest I've experienced since I moved to Kansas 5 years ago. That being said, I know growing up in the South, throw some humidity in there, it's even hotter, or it feels like it at least. But being pregnant during all of this summer heat has given me an even deeper respect for those brood mares you see carrying babies in harsh weather conditions. Don't get me wrong, it is worth every sacrifice and every bit of being uncomfortable once that precious babe hits the ground, but it sure isn't for the faint of heart. Speaking of babies, I originally had planned to record and air this episode in real time on Saturday, July 24th in celebration of National Day of the Cowboy. But I went into labor. So here I am today finishing recording this show with my very first cowboy co-host, McCrae Jennings Johnson. He made his grand entrance on Sunday, July 25th at 3 a.m. We are absolutely in love. He is a big and healthy Hoss Cartwright from Bonanza kind of cowboy already, weighed 10 pounds, 1 ounce, and was 21 inches long. My husband Tyler and I just greatly appreciate everyone's prayers and support as we've been preparing for this new season of parenthood, and now we are in it with a toddler and a newborn. And you guys, our hearts are just so full, and so are our hands right now, but we are grateful just for this blessing of a new baby, and we're doing our best to soak it all in right now. As we know, just time flies when you're having fun, and while parenthood can be exhausting in every sense of the word, it is such a precious gift, and so we're just really leaning into that right now, and we appreciate all of your prayers and support. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen a post I made back in May where I shared that I joined a monthly membership called Cowgirls Over Coffee. You can check out my personal page on Instagram at Dakota Dawn Johnson to read more about why I joined, but I wanted to share on this episode one of the best practices I've picked back up actually, and I'm working really hard to be diligent and consistent about, all thanks to Thea Larson, the founder of Cowgirls Over Coffee. And y'all, this practice is not anything new. It's simply just, she was a great reminder of why it's so important to journal. So yes, I have started journaling again, and it has been such a powerful practice for me to pick back up. I've always enjoyed writing, and I know it helps me just my overall state of being whenever I get my thoughts out on paper or even type them out in the notes on my phone sometimes if, I don't have pen and paper handy. But somewhere along the way, I let myself get too busy and quit making time for something that I actually enjoyed. Now, there may be some of you listening to this that are like, girl, I do not enjoy writing. What do I write about? I don't want a food diary. And I get that too. Like, journaling is not easy for everyone, writing's not easy for everyone. But I want to encourage you to, look up, you can Google journaling prompts. I'll be happy to share some as well. Some great ideas for journaling, but that's actually where the idea for this episode came from, is a journal post that I made and just on life lessons. And it was a prompt that I found. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to really sit and reflect on this for a few minutes this morning. And it took me to such a sweet memory. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. The journaling prompt that I used the other day was about life lessons learned. And once I started writing about that and really reflecting on it, I started asking myself, what was the first life lesson like I ever learned? I can remember. And it all started on the back of a horse. I was 4 years old, and I remember being 4 years old, knowing that for a fact because of two reasons. One, I was still an only child at this point, and two, I remember my preschool teacher. I was in preschool, and her name was Miss Versi McKelvey. So in this memory, I was riding my black and white Shetland pony named Oreo, following my mom. She was leading the way, on this trail ride, just kind of right there at our house. And she was on this big sorrel flying bee mare with a flaxen mane and tail. We called her Lady. She was so, so pretty. And, we'd been riding through this open pasture, and then we made our way to more of like a true trail through like a pretty wooded and shaded area. And we'd, ridden through here before. I remember that, but it had been a little bit since we had went that way. And I was looking up at, the trees just seemed so, so tall. And we had went from it being really bright out in this pasture with all the sun into this, really shaded and wooded area. So I was looking up and, thinking like how pretty the sunlight looked coming down through those really tall trees. And you guys, I didn't have any business looking straight up, even at 4 years old. Like, instead of looking between my pony's ears, like my mama had told me many times before, and probably no less than 20 times already on this ride alone, I was just, kind of in la la land, looking up and letting my pony do all the work and follow Lady. So just as I was getting myself focused back to looking between my pony Oreo, his ears, I hear my mama say, "Duck, Dakota, duck." And so what do? What any 4-year-old would do. I sit up tall in my saddle and I start looking around trying to find the duck because I want to see this duck that my mom's clearly trying to tell me about. It mentioned my preschool teacher earlier. So that week at preschool, like, we had been learning about the letter D and ducks. And so that was what was on my mind. And my mom didn't realize that, when she's telling me to actually duck, because she was holding like a green limb on a tree back in front of me on her horse, trying to keep it, from hitting me and Oreo. And I didn't register. That's what she was trying to tell me, because I'm over here, looking for this duck, expecting something to come quacking out from behind a tree. So that limb, she held it as long as she could. And about the time I looked forward, that limb whipped back, and it was just my height. It slapped me square in the face. I let out a big cry, and with tears rolling down my face, y'all, I was mad. I was whooping mad that I had just got hit with this tree limb. So my mom, she quickly dismounts. She's standing beside me, and Oreo checking me over, and this big whelp across my face from the green tree limb. And I remember, in the midst of me crying, she said that I asked her why she hit me with a stick. And she said, "Dakota, I told you to duck." And I said, "I know, Mama. I was looking for the duck like you said when you hit me with that stick." And to be 4 years old, your interpretation of what somebody else is saying isn't always going to come across the way that they mean for it to. And so as I was reflecting on all that and journaling, it just made me smile because y'all, until this day, I still think of this every time I see a duck or go on a trail ride, either or. And it's a great reminder of like the very first life lesson I ever learned. And it's such a valuable lesson that, 30 years later, I still, am reminded of and put into practice is that one word can have very different meanings. And depending on when and how you say it and who you say it to and what their past experiences are, they're going to perceive what you say differently as well. And the other two things I learned besides that life lesson were green tree limbs, they can leave a mark. I had that little whelp on my face for a while. And then always, always, always look where you're going. Don't have your head in the clouds. Look between your horse's ears. If you're not looking ahead, that was the whole point. My mom wanted me to look between my pony's ears so that I could see what was up ahead, could be aware of things. And so those were two really, really big lessons that I learned is one word can have multiple meanings. And if you're not looking ahead, then you're likely to get yourself in a situation that's undesirable because you're not preparing for that. As I shared earlier, it just makes me smile whenever I think about that memory. And that's happened quite a bit, actually, as I've started journaling. Sometimes, McCray, our co-host, there we go. Sorry, he was wanting to be heard too on this episode. He'd been a little quiet. So everybody can say that they heard him make his debut on this podcast episode he's less than a week old right now. Anyway, back to the story. So, in journaling, I've just been able to give myself the room to have some of these emotions. Sometimes I'm feeling in really deep thought and I might write something that's pretty heavy, but then a lot of times when I start writing and journaling, it brings me a lot of joy reflecting back on things or even thinking towards the future. And, in this case right now, as I'm sitting here recording this podcast, holding my baby and thinking about the life lessons my mom taught me in the saddle, on the back of the horse, things that I learned, how excited I am about being able to teach our boys, similar life lessons and just have those experiences to share with them. So I want to encourage you. I'm going to give you 3 prompts that you could try journaling with. And there's lots of them out there, but these are 3 that, maybe would be fun for you to try. So one is life lessons learned. And you just write, even if you can only write a couple of lines, it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. So that is one idea. Second is my favorite day ever. So, and this stuff doesn't have to be time bound, you guys. It can be about your favorite day you've ever had, the favorite day that you haven't had yet that you really, really want to have. And then last but not least, this one is one that really always gets my wheels turning every time I do it. And I do it pretty regular, is in 5 years, I see myself ... So, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I found a journal from high school the other day, and the things I thought I would have accomplished by the time I was 30. I thought I was going to have a lot of things together and be pretty darn successful whenever I was a 16-year-old in high school. And while I am really, really enjoying this stage of life I'm in, there's some things that I accomplished, from back at that journaling time, but there's some things that I'm like, girl, you could have been working on that when you were 16 years old and you still wouldn't have reached that yet at 34. But it's just a lot of fun to be able to look back and reflect and see how far you've come, see where you want to go, and just all the different emotions and things that you've learned in between. So Thank y'all for tuning in for today's episode. Also want to share with you that we're going to put a brief pause. This isn't a gone forever, but just a brief pause on putting out new episodes until September. So it's crazy to think, but September we'll be celebrating 1 full year since the podcast first episode aired. And I actually started working on this podcast in July of 2020 with my good friends Jenna and Lauren, and they were huge cheerleaders for me to just take action to get this thing up and running. And I'm so glad and so appreciative that they did, because a lot has changed over the past year. But once you start doing something, you just kind of find your rhythm. You figure things out as you go. There is no time like the present. And so over the next 45 days or so, I'm going to continue to be pre-recording some episodes with some really incredible women, cowgirls from all walks of life. I'll be sharing those over on our Instagram page, so be sure to follow us at Cowgirl Confessions Podcast so that you guys can weigh in, share some questions that you maybe want these people to answer. And then in September, we're going to be rolling out some really exciting things, celebrating our first year, first trip around the sun, having a podcast talking about things we've learned, the growth, the things we want to be better at, be more efficient and effective, and have some great giveaways too for all of y'all that have supported and tuned in, shared with your friends, your word of mouth, and just your overall support and friendship means so much to me. So thanks again for tuning in. And we will catch up with you soon. Until next time, keep following us over on Instagram at the Cowgirl Confessions Podcast. And I would love it if you would leave us a review if you feel so led. That's going to help us share this with more and more people. Take care, y'all. Thank you for spending your time with me on the Cowgirl Confessions Podcast. I'm so glad y'all stopped by. If you could take a moment to share this episode and tag us on social media, I'd be happier than a cowgirl in a sea of buy one, get one vintage turquoise. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. New episodes will be released bi-monthly. Please leave us a review if you feel so led by going to iTunes. Your feedback will really help us breed the idea of grabbing life by the horns with a cowgirl state of mind into women across the globe. Some that may have never even had the privilege to throw their leg over a horse, but could most certainly use the cowgirl state of mind while navigating life. Thanks again, y'all. Until next time, keep pursuing your dreams with that all go and no woe mentality. Remember, you're writing a story that's worth saddling up for, sister.